Specifically, what does the Prime Minister need to do going forward?
Josh, would you mind looking a bit
Sure.
this way? Thank you.
The first thing the Prime Minister needs to do is he and his government need to declare yesterday's attack at the Addas Synagogue a terrorist event. There was a firebombing of a place of worship with people inside who have been injured as a result. And the legislation is very clear. When it comes to racially or politically or religiously motivated violence, such as this attack, it is a terrorist attack, and it needs to be declared as such. The second thing the Prime Minister should do is stand up a national police task force to focus on curbing and stopping and combating anti-Semitism. This needs to bring together the federal police and state police bodies. This is not about other forms of hate right now. This is not about Islamophobia. This is about anti-Semitism, which is happening every day on our streets. And I can give you chapter and verse about the hundreds and thousands of incidents that we have seen in the last 14 months. You cannot deny this obvious fact. And this task force needs to enforce the law and, where necessary, advise on strengthening the law. After that terrible protest, just days after the October the 7th attack, we saw people protesting outside the Opera House. Nova and I visited it there. The only person who was arrested was a Jewish person holding an Israeli flag, not the other protesters saying F the Jews and a lot worse. And thirdly, the Prime Minister needs to call a judicial inquiry into our educational institutions where there is anti-Semitism run wild. Our education institutions should be houses of learning, but they have become hotbeds of hate. And Julian Leeser was calling for a judicial inquiry last year, and it's been backed in by the Prime Minister's own special envoy on anti-Semitism, yet the government has done nothing. The government needs to use its influence, its levers, to pressure the universities to actually enforce their own bylaws on campus, because I can tell you, Jewish students and other students do not feel safe. And that is not acceptable in a free country such as Australia.
Do members in the community fear another attack of some description?
Members of the community are extremely fearful. They feel alone, they feel vulnerable, and they feel despondent about the lack of action from those whose duty, whose elected responsibility is to act and is to lead. In the documentary, again, I interviewed Holocaust survivors, and one, Mimi Wise, said to the Prime Minister, she stared down the camera, she said, "Lead, Prime Minister." A leader is somebody who's prepared to take risks. You might be worried about the electoral consequences in a particular electorate from taking strong action, but that is not your primary purpose. Your primary purpose, Prime Minister, is to keep Australians safe. And right now, they feel unsafe. And as Nova has alluded to, this is not a Jewish community's problem alone. This is Australia's problem. The attack we saw on the Addas Synagogue was an attack on Australian values. What we have seen outside the Maya Christmas windows, what we have seen at our sporting events, what we have seen in terms of daily protests and people waving the flags of listed terrorist organisations without sanction. This is unacceptable. And yet it is occurring in Australia on the Prime Minister's watch.